All right, what's up, guys? I'm going to do a quick little 60-second tech tip, as Brad calls them. That's Brad at HVAC NSC. I'm going to steal his idea. I don't think I can do it as quick and organized as he can, so we may not be able to call it a 60-second tech tip, but I'm going to just do a quick tech tip concerning these expensive blue vac micron gauges that a lot of us use. Most of us use, actually. Okay. For one thing, you can see the rubber seal, just like our 1/4-inch hoses and all our gauges and manifolds have. So that's really what it's relying on to seal there. So the point of that is, although you may have to replace that after, I don't know, a couple hundred uses or something, but really you don't have to crank this down to get it to seal. Not really hard. However, if you do want to crank it down, the last thing you want is the heartache of, I mean, this thing is close to 300 bucks if I remember right. The last thing you want is the heartache of the cheap plastic housing inside of there breaking. So this nut right here, it's easy enough to use that as a backup wrench placement. Just like automotively, we learn that, and in a lot of places in our field. But if you have the backup wrench there and you're holding it, you can really crank that, and you haven't put any pressure on the housing of the unit. Now, I don't think it's that necessary to crank it that hard, and honestly, that's just rough on the rubber seal. Once it's tight enough, it's it's sealed. It's going to be fine. But if you want to crank it down, just put yourself a backup wrench on there, and that's a good way to protect your tool. Now, if you do that, you should also put the backup wrench back on there to take it off, and hold the wrench steady so that when you remove it, you're not putting pressure either way. Now, one other quick thing that's just my opinion. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and I appreciate other people sharing theirs with me, so every now and then I share mine. I don't use Nylog on anything that I'm going to consider to be serviceable often. Something I'm going to use a lot, I'm not going to put Nylog or anything on it. The other thing is, like on a flare that's permanent, this is a flare seat, but that's not how we're using it with that rubber seal. But on something that's permanent, like a gas line or something, I guess I could see what the point of the Nylog is. Really for me, the only good I've ever found of it was to try to seal a service valve cap on on the AC unit where you're getting a little bit of leak by on the actual valve itself. People call them king valves. But on something that's apart and together so many times, I just don't see the advantage of the Nylog. Number one, oil and dust are the number two enemies, number one and number two worst enemies to your micron gauge. If you notice, they give you the bent tube specifically. If you read the instructions, it even tells you to mount this thing, and most all of us use them on a core tool, to mount this thing to where it's up out of the flow of any oil getting in it while you're pulling a vacuum. Oil, just as well as Nylog, is actually a dust magnet, and dust and oil, as I said, are the number one and two worst enemies of your micron gauge, the sensor in the micron gauge. That's why we have to flush them a lot of times and clean them. They get dirty. So that's why I don't use Nylog on anything like that. But nonetheless, the backup wrench will possibly save you some heartache. and I would consider putting a backup wrench on there if I were going to crank this down very tight. The last thing you want to do is hold it by the housing and crank down on that. That could be a big disappointment for you. And for those of us that use this one, the Blue Vac Pro, it's really expensive. So you don't want to buy it but once. So just thought I'd throw that out, and love to hear your comments, feedback. Like, share, subscribe. Good or bad, comment anything you wish. I'm open to hear it. Thanks for watching.